Good morning. I'm Kelly Good, and I'm a volunteer with ATD Cascadia chapter. And we're excited to be here with you today, and we're excited to have Anna Heinrich and Kristen Gebhardt here with us as well on our panel. And today we'll be talking about CPLP and APTD certifications. The what, the why, and the how. And I do have a lot of information for you as well on some slides here, but we would also like to really hear from Anna and Kristen about their experiences with these two certifications. We have the, on your screen there, you'll see an area where you can enter questions. So feel free to start sending questions. And if you're having any technical difficulties or anything like that, you can message that as well. There are some tips in the email that you received on how to troubleshoot those as well, so you can read that. So to get us started, I will have Anna and Kristen introduce themselves, and then we will give you a little information about these two certifications, and then we will get going with questions. Okay, and I have a little pad in front of me here that I can open, and I will see your questions right here. So if I'm looking at this, that's me looking at your questions. If we don't get to all your questions today, we will make sure to answer them in here, and you will have access to this page for a couple days after the event. So let's start with Anna. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Heinrich. I'm a CPLP certified, and I am with OHSU. I'm a learning specialist in their learning and development department of their HR. I'm excited to be here. I got my certification, I guess it would be 3 or 4 years ago, because I'm about to do my recertification. I'm about to send in all my information for that. So that's me.
Great. And Kristen?
I am Kristen Gebhardt, and I am an APTD. I work as an instructional designer in the dental sales and distribution industry, and I got my APTD about a year ago as part of the pilot program.
Great. So let's dissect those acronyms. What is CPLP? Some of you on the call or on the screen may already know a little bit about this, but let's just do quick definitions. Certified Professional Learning and Performance is what CPLP stands for, and it's offered by the ATD Certification Institute, which is part of ATD National, and it is a broad-based certification and addresses 10 areas of expertise that are part of that ATD competency model that you may be familiar with. You can always learn more about that competency model by going to the ATD website as well. And APTD is new. This was something folks have been asking for a while. It stands for Associate Professional in Talent Development. I'm still getting used to that acronym myself, it's new. But, and this is targeted for people that are early in their careers and have aspirations focused on a few areas of expertise, so not all 10. And it can also be used as like a stepping stone towards your CPLP. There's a variety of reasons why you might seek one certification over the other. And hopefully by talking with Anna and Kristen today, we can help guide you if you're considering one of these. And there are, this will probably be the first question I'd like to ask Anna and Kristen, but here are some of the just obvious reasons why people might get certified. But let me check and see, whoops, here we go. Okay, so I don't see a specific question yet, so I'm going to ask the question of these folks, of Anna and Kristen, of why specifically you decided to get certified. And,
well, me first?
Oh yeah, sure. We'll start with Anna.
Well, so it was a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and at the time I was working as an independent consultant. So for me, to get certified is a way of saying to all my potential clients that, like, and I already had a master's in adult education at that point, but I think the certification like that, knowing what it does, and it becomes an industry standard. When I was looking for clients, to say that I was CPLP certified just showed a certain level of professionalism, a certain level of knowledge, and a a certain level of expertise in many different areas, since the CPLP is pretty broad. So definitely it was a way for me to be able to attract more clients. Now, currently in my role now at OHSU, I think it helps with just that broad understanding of everything that goes on within learning and development, and having some knowledge, some skill set in all of them to be able to kind of manage it a little bit more, I guess. I guess that's why I was going for it. I guess that's the question. So that's where I was. What about you?
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. So I had come out of higher education. I'd been an instructional designer in higher ed for some time, and I had a master's degree as well, and didn't ever really think of certification until I entered the private sector. And when I got into the private sector, I noticed a lot of jobs were asking for some kind of ATD or industry certification, and the CPLP was one that popped up a lot. And I didn't necessarily feel like I had the experience to cover all of those areas of expertise. And so it kind of intimidated me a little bit. So I decided not to get certified. And then about 6 months later, the APTD was announced. And it kind of fit me perfectly in the sense that it focused on the 3 areas of expertise that I worked in, which are instructional design, learning technologies, and training facilitation. And it allowed me to take that initial step and kind of get my feet wet before I decided to take on that whole monster of the CPLP.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
So I will go ahead and click to the next one about how to get certified, and then maybe we'll do a question around that. So these are some of the basic requirements for CPLP. There's a knowledge exam and a skills application exam. Some of you might be aware that there used to be a work product that was the second requirement for CPLP, and they have recently changed that to a skills application exam. And it does, I see anywhere from 6 months, 9 months to a year to prep, but I'm going to be curious to hear how long maybe it took you all to prep and how your prep experience was. And then with APTD, there is an exam, and they say, on the site that it takes about 60 hours of prep, but let's see what Anna and Kristen say. Let's start with Kristen this time.
Prep? How did I prep?
How did you prep? How was your prep experience?
My prep experience was fun. So I had purchased the learning system, and I also purchased the on-demand course. So I had both of those to use. I prepped mostly by going through the learning system and just reviewing the areas that I thought I was weaker in, and using kind of what they say they were going to test on to kind of guide that prep. And then I used the on-demand course really to do some last-minute knowledge checking. A lot of the on-demand course, at least for the APTD, was practice-type questions. And the cool thing about the on-demand course is that all the questions are fill-in-the-blank or matching or kind of higher-level questions. And the exam itself for certification is all multiple choice. So if you prep with the on-demand course, you are more than prepared to answer the multiple choice type questions that come on the test. So I probably spent maybe 10 hours a week for 4 to 6 weeks prepping, so 40 to 60 hours sounds about right.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Anna?
Well, so I had just finished, I was about 6 months out of finishing my master's program in adult education, which kind of was another reason to do, I know that sounds a little backwards and that was another reason to do this certification, because I figured I had a lot of the knowledge down, and it was true. I didn't have to study as much. However, I took the program with Owl's Ledge, which is on the ATD resource page. They're another provider. And at the time they were doing live virtual classes, which was great mainly because they strategized for me how to prepare, and then they gave me the plan. I knew, okay, so this week I have to spend this much time studying this one and this much time studying the next one next week, and kind of was able to lay out the whole plan for me. But I would say I probably spent around 80, probably just under 80, since I was coming out of my master's, but for the knowledge exam. Now, during my time, we had to do a work product, and that took a lot of prep. You were prepping way in advance because you had to look at what you've done or think of what you're about to do and make sure you're collecting the appropriate documentation for all these different levels. So that took that took more prep than the knowledge exam. But that's going to be different. So I can't really speak to what the skills exam looks like at this point. So.
Thank you. We did have a comment from a viewer, Nancy, saying, yay, on not requiring a work product. I imagine I hear from folks that some people prefer a test, some people prefer a work product, so that might be a personal decision.
That's right. I imagine if you're not a good test taker, you don't like take tests, that could be where the work product might have been preferred, but I don't know. I haven't seen the tests, so.
Okay, yeah. And we have a question from Bob. He's asking if you're an experienced professional and had to choose between getting a master's degree and a CPLP, which would you choose? Which do you think has more value for you? Either one of you want to speak to that?
What do you think, Kristen?
I personally think it's industry specific. I mean, just from my experience in higher ed, there weren't a lot of jobs asking for any kind of talent development or learning and development type certification if you had a master's degree. That was kind of the qualifier. And when I entered the private sector, that's really when I started to see the certifications. I'd just get both, but
Yeah.
that's kind of an investment.
Bob, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have a good answer because I would agree. I would say both because I think part of it also depends on what program you go through. But you could go through a really good program that gives you a lot of hands-on experience, but whoever you're applying for doesn't know that. So they may think, oh, this person has a master's and they only theoretical. They don't have any hands-on practical. So that's where the CPL will have that proof, like here's the hands-on practical experience that I can prove that I have. So there is that. So there's no good answer. I'm sorry, I can't answer that, Bob.
Well, and I could pipe in here as somebody who just finished my master's degree in educational leadership, and I am one of those that's on the fence, so I'm listening intently. But I am in the private sector. I did read a statistic recently from, I can't remember the name of it, I believe it was one of the ATD reports where they said that 100% of recruiters prefer certifications. I don't know if they meant prefer it over, I don't think they meant prefer it over a degree necessarily, but it's always a good thing, right? Okay, so with that, let's move on to resources. Both of you mentioned different resources that you used, and I think some people might have questions about which resources are available, and we have some information on costs as well. On the screen on the slide are a few resources that are available through ATD. They have the on-demand materials as well as a whole system, a CPLP learning system and APTD learning system available, and I can bring up information on that here in a minute. I did want to mention that the Puget Sound ATD chapter has offered to allow other ATD members of other chapters to attend their online or their virtual instructor-led study group. And I think it's like $50 to join, and there may be another cost for materials. So you can explore their website for more information about that. But Anna, I'll start with you this time. Do you want to speak about what materials you used?
I had access. I was actually going through the Owl's Ledge. I keep saying them because I couldn't remember their name earlier until I did this. But part of the reason I went through them is I had a barter thing going on, which was really nice. So I was able to get it for a significant discount. But they were doing live virtual classes, and they offered a lot of materials. They offered a lot of test prep. They would point you to CPLP apps for your phone, like flashcard type things to help you memorize different terms. So there was a lot they offered in that package. So that's the only thing I did. I mean, I don't want to say the only thing, because they gave you so many other resources to pull together and work on. So I was doing a lot of that. I did not use the CPLP learning system. In terms, the LinkedIn group wasn't available when I was doing it. However, the group that went through these OWL Sledge classes, you kind of became a bit of a cohort, because there were 25 of us or so who were going through it. So we had some communication of our own going on. And there was a lot of practice tests that I took. Yeah, so I think that those are the resources I use primarily. They were very helpful too with the work product too, which I don't have to talk about since we're not doing it, but I don't know what they do for the tests now, but they were very helpful for the work product.
And ATD National does offer to allow you to take a practice test for free. Kristen?
Yeah, so I did use the learning system, and I used the on-demand course, and both of those are self-study resources, so I never had a live instructor or any kind of live meetings with that. The learning system is kind of just like reminded me of an ebook kind of, where it's a lot of information and then there's some quizzing at the end that you can take to see how you retain that information. So I use that as my beginning prep, just to kind of gauge where I was. And then the on-demand course is really cool because it's at your own pace, but it also adjusts to how you're performing. So if you do poorly on one section, it will adjust and ask you more of those types of questions. So it adapts to your performance. And like I said, that system was, the questions were higher level questions and a little bit harder, I thought, than what was on the actual certification exam. So using that really pushed me up to that next level.
Thank you.
Can I add one other thing that I did like what the OWL's Ledge did is for the testing part, they really spent a lot of time dissecting the percentages of how to pass. So when it came down to there's the 10 competencies, but when you look at the test, and I'm sure ATD does such a nice job of laying out exactly what is required, and ATD had laid out 40% of the test is on this, 20% is on this section, 10% is on this. So you could literally strategize, which is exactly what I did. And there were a couple of those competencies that I didn't study for. And I said, well, I'm just going to have to go with what I know. And I just studied for the ones that I knew would give me the best bang for the buck. And that's how I passed. So it was nice to kind of have that strategy. And I do believe, I recommend you do that. And ATD does a great job of laying it all out for you.
Thank you. Good tips. Here, I do have a slide here that shows the costs for the different resources and to actually register as a member and then take the registration if you're not a member as far as for the exams. And then if you need to reschedule. I think, Anna, you mentioned you're getting ready to recertify.
I am, yes.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about that. So every 3 years as a CPLP, there's a recertification requirement.
So what that looks like is throughout the course of the 3 years, you're collecting classes you've attended, volunteer events that you've done, any writing that you've done for ATD or professional organizations, if there's new project or something you've learned. There's so many points worth that you can get for all these different recertification tasks. So really, recertification happens right after you get your award. You're starting to track what you're doing to get that recertification. So I'm actually at the point where I just simply need to fill in the paperwork, because I have done a really good job of keeping track of everything I've done and keeping proof of what I've done and all this good stuff. So that's what that consists of. It's really just, and that's why I do like what ATD's certification is about, because it isn't just, at the end of 3 years, even if you haven't done anything, you take another test. It doesn't work that way. You have to spend those 3 years continuing to improve yourself as a professional in a variety of ways, not just in classes. In fact, you can't do it all. You can't just take learning classes to recertify. You have to do other things. So it really does, when I see something that's a little bit difficult, that takes a little more challenging for me, but I think it also speaks to the fact that this is a good certification. This is something that is worthwhile to the learning professional. So So that's what it requires, and it requires some fees, of course, in addition to that. I would add to that fee structure, you get so many points for being a member of ATD. So I would even add on to that 200 the fact that you should be a national and a local chapter member for the 3 years of recertification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kristen, is there a recertification piece to your certificate?
There is, and it's essentially the same process. So it's a 3-year certification, and in the same way that for the CPLP you would have to accumulate points, you have to do that for the APTD. It's less points, I think, than you have to get for the CPLP, but in a similar vein, you have to do multiple different areas. Some have to be hands-on applications, some can be learning courses. So similar process.
Thank you. Here, I did pull up a slide here on the learning system, some information about it and the cost there on the right. So I think you said, Kristen, that you did purchase the learning system and then Anna used OWL. Okay, and then recertification, we just talked about that. Here's a little more detail on recertification. They were mentioning there's different things, different categories. So I'm speaking and instructing. So will you get recertification points for this today?
I'll be able to use them for, I think, next year. I think that's how it goes.
Great. And also local chapter events. Some of them offer recertification points as well. Is that
That's
correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And any volunteer work you do for the local chapters, you get points in, I think it's leadership and recognition. So that's nice too.
Great. Okay. Oh, I have another question here. What is the full retail cost of the OWL Edge course? I don't know if you remember. It's been too long.
I
Maybe.
am so sorry. I don't know. But there is if you go to the local chapters resource page, so the ATD Cascadia's resource page, they have a link to the OWL's Ledge. And I did click on that to see what they're doing. And they're not doing the live classes anymore. It looks like it's a more self-paced kind of program. But you can go check that out.
And that link is on the page you're on to right now. There's a link to the Cascadia website on there, so you can check it out through there. Okay, and then I did want to touch on the part that is new for CPLP. For those of you that are familiar with CPLP, the way it was prior with the work product, this is some information about the skills application exam, since that piece is new. And basically, as a candidate, you would select one of the 3 areas of expertise and focus on that and then take that particular exam. And there are multiple choice, and then there's some other information there. Okay, so with that, we didn't have Luke there. So any other questions folks want to ask? We have a little bit more time. You can feel free to put those in the chat. While we're waiting for questions, I will mention that as a hiring manager, I'm looking for candidates right now, and that certification piece is always something that jumps out at me as far as looking for new instructional designers. But anyway, with that, we'll give it another minute or two. It's okay. If there's anything the two of you think of that you might want to share. Maybe a question would be, impact to your family, or just how hard was the studying experience? Was there anything that you might want to add to that as far as that goes? How disruptive was it to your world during their prep time?
I was working as an independent contractor, so I had managed my own schedule at the time. So there wasn't a lot of impact other than impact to my workload. Independent contractor, sometimes you're working late at night when everybody's asleep. so that I didn't see that as a big barrier. I will tell you one thing I did do, though. The day of the test for me was in Tillamook, and I live here in Portland. So I went over to Tillamook for 2 days, and I got a hotel room, and I spent those 2 days cramming, making sure I had everything before I went and took the test. So that was kind of cool. That's a tip, I guess. Spend a day or two extra in cram. And that came from the Owl's Edge. They recommended doing that, and I think that did help.
I did the exact same thing.
Did you? Oh, good. See?
My test was in Tacoma, so I went up the night before and did the same thing. The whole day and night I was just cramming for things that I thought I needed to do.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, with that, I think we might just wrap it up then. And you will have, like I said, a couple days to go back to this page, and you can look at the resources that are linked. And if you do send in a question, even if we've ended, we can still respond to you if you'd like. And again, thanks everyone, and have a great day.